Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Get ready, because today we're messing with your senses.
Really messing with them.
Yeah, a little bit. Specifically, we're diving into the world of optical illusions, where what you see is definitely not what you get.
It's true, our brains are shockingly easy to fool.
Yeah,
And that's what makes optical illusions so fascinating.
I know it. I love optical illusions.
Me too.
Hmm.
They're like these little windows into how our brains actually construct our visual reality.
Yeah,
It's all a construction.
that's so cool. And I see we've got a really cool article here from Name of Manufacturer all about how these visual tricks work.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It starts off by comparing the eye to a camera,
Mm-hmm.
but then it quickly goes down the rabbit hole of how much more complex our vision actually is.
Yeah, way more complex. The camera analogy is a good starting point,
Right.
but it only gets you so far. Think of it this way. Your eye takes in light,
Okay.
just like a camera lens.
Okay.
That light passes through the cornea,
Mhm.
which is that clear outer layer,
Yeah.
then through the lens, which focuses it.
Okay. So far, so good. Light goes in, gets focused, kind of like, I don't know, adjusting the focus on a camera lens.
Exactly. And that focused light ends up hitting the retina, which is at the back of your eye.
Okay.
If the eye were a camera, the retina would be like the sensor or the film.
Okay. I'm picturing it. So the light hits the retina and boom, we see, right?
Not quite. This is where the camera analogy really starts to break down. You see, the retina isn't just passively recording an image.
Okay.
It's covered in millions of specialized cells called photoreceptors. These little guys are the real stars of the show.
Photoreceptors, huh?
Eh.
Tell me more. What do these superstar cells actually do?
They're like tiny light translators. They take that light energy
Okay.
and convert it into electrical signals that your brain can understand. Imagine a fiber optic cable transmitting data at lightning speed. That's kind of what's happening here.
Wow. So our eyes are sending our brains constant high-speed data streams. No wonder my brain feels tired sometimes. But wait, there are different types of photoreceptor cells, right? Something about rods and cones.
You got it. And they each have their own specialties. Rods are like the night owls of the eye.
Okay.
They're super sensitive and work best in low light. They help us see shapes and movement even when it's dark. Think about walking around your house at night. Your rods are hard at work.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about cones? What do they do?
Cones are all about color and detail.
Okay.
They kick in when there's plenty of light
Okay.
and allow us to see those crisp, vibrant colors in all their glory. Think about a rainbow or a dazzling sunset.
Mhm.
Those are your cones putting in the work.
Okay, that's fascinating. So light enters the eye, gets focused by the lens, and hits the retina, where it's translated into electrical signals by these amazing rods and cones. But those signals aren't just sitting there, are they? Where do they go next?
You're on the right track. This is where that high-speed data cable we talked about comes in the optic nerve. It carries all those electrical signals from your retina up to the brain for processing.
So the optic nerve is like the VIP courier rushing all that visual information straight to the brain's inbox.
Exactly. But here's the thing. What happens in the brain
Yeah.
is where things get really mind-blowing.
Okay, I'm ready to have my mind blown. Lay it on me.
Yeah.
What exactly is our brain doing with all that visual data? It's not just passively watching a live feed, is it?
Not at all. That's the really wild part. Your brain is actively interpreting all those electrical signals. It's stitching them together, filling in gaps, and even making some educated guesses along the way.
So it's not just a straight shot from eye to brain. It's more like our brain is taking all that raw data and creating its own visual masterpiece.
Exactly. It's like your brain is a master chef in the kitchen, whipping up a gourmet meal
Okay.
with whatever ingredients your eyes send it. And sometimes those ingredients are a little messy or incomplete.
Yeah, I like that analogy. So if our brains are these master chefs creating our visual reality, what causes those kitchen nightmares? You know, the optical illusions where our brains get totally tricked.
Well, think of it this way. Our brains are wired to find patterns and make sense of the world
Yeah.
as quickly as possible. And to do that, they rely on certain shortcuts, assumptions, based on our past experiences.
Ah, so like those times when you think you see your friend across the street, but it turns out to be a total stranger. Our brain is just trying to be efficient, but sometimes it jumps to conclusions.
Precisely. And that's where optical illusions come in. They exploit those shortcuts, those assumptions our brains make.
Okay.
They're like little visual puzzles that highlight the cracks in our perception.
Yeah, and our article actually gives us some great examples of how this works. Let's talk about linear perspective for a sec. I know artists use this all the time to create depth on a flat surface.
Right. It's that classic trick where parallel lines seem to converge as they get farther away. like a road disappearing into the horizon,
Yeah.
even though we know it's just a flat painting.
So our brains can't help but see depth.
It's like our brains are saying, converging lines must be depth. I've seen this before. Time to switch to 3D mode, even though intellectually we know it's an illusion.
That's a great way to put it. And our source mentions another fascinating example, the Miller-Lyer illusion.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever seen this one?
Oh, yeah. The one with two lines that are the same length, but one has arrows pointing in and the other has arrows pointing out. And the one with the outward pointing arrows always looks longer. It drives me crazy.
It's a classic. And it all comes down to how our brains perceive depth. Those outward pointing arrows,
Yeah.
they trick our brains into thinking that line is farther away,
Yeah.
like the corner of a room extending out towards us.
So our brains are basically applying real-world depth cues to a flat image.
Right.
And it totally messes with our perception.
Exactly. Our brains are so used to interpreting those depth cues in our 3D world that we can't help but apply them even when they're misleading us. And then there's that other illusion. I love Rubens' vase at sea. So you can either see two faces or a vase, but never both at the same time.
Ah, yes. A perfect example of how our brains can only focus on one interpretation at a time. We flip back and forth
Yeah.
between seeing the faces or the vase, but we can never see both simultaneously.
It's like our brain is saying, okay, pick a side, team faces or team vase. You can't have both.
And that decision, that back and forth flip-flopping is happening constantly
Yeah.
as our brains try to make sense of the world around us.
This is blowing my mind. So it's not just about the information our eyes are sending to our brains. It's about how our brains are choosing to interpret and prioritize that information. It's like we're all walking around with these incredibly powerful but easily fooled visual processors in our heads.
That's a great way to put it. But it's important to remember these illusions aren't glitches in the system. They're not mistakes.
They're not like our brains are malfunctioning or something.
Right. Exactly. They're more like clues than errors. By studying how our brains get tricked by these visual puzzles, scientists can actually learn a lot about how perception, decision-making, even consciousness itself work.
Wow, really? That's wild. It's like by looking at what happens when things go a little off, we can gain a deeper understanding of how our brains function in everyday life.
Precisely. There was this fascinating study where researchers used the Mueller-Lyer illusion to study how culture might influence perception.
Okay, now that is interesting. Tell me more about this study. What did they find?
Well, they found that people from different cultures actually perceive the illusion differently. Those who grew up in environments with lots of carpentered corners, like Western societies, were more susceptible to the illusion than those from cultures with fewer carpentered corners.
That's so interesting. So our environment, our culture can actually shape how our brains perceive illusions.
Exactly. It shows that our brains are constantly learning, adapting, and fine-tuning our perception based on our experiences.
This is blowing my mind. So these illusions aren't just fun little tricks. They're powerful tools that can help us understand the complexities of the human brain.
Absolutely. They reveal the hidden processes behind how we see and make sense of the world.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about how my own eyes and brain work. It's amazing how much is happening behind the scenes every time we look at something.
It really is. And it makes you wonder if our brains can be tricked so easily by simple lines, shapes, and colors. What other subtle ways might our perception be shaped by our experiences, our biases, the information we encounter?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's like those optical illusions are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding how our brains construct our realities.
Exactly. There's always more to discover about the amazing world of perception.
Well said. A huge thank you to our source material for today. It's given us a lot to think about. And to all of you listening out there, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep your eyes peeled for those everyday illusions. They're everywhere.
Until next time, keep those brains of yours engaged and never stop questioning what you see.
And on that note, we'll catch you on our next deep dive.